Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. Now, as we promised at the end of our World Championships review podcast last week, we have a World Championship swimmer and, Dan, a World Championship medalist on this podcast for everyone in Lauren Cox.
Yeah, I mean, what a moment in the career of Lauren Cox. I remember some people were questioning why she was selected on the team. Do you remember that? And yet she comes away with the bronze medal in the 50 backstroke. I mean, what a story, what a season she's had. And I can't wait to hear everything, all her thoughts about it, basically.
Yes, so let's have a quick listen for what's to come on this week's show.
So I did a lot of visualization of anything, really. If I'm in the cool room, I just close my eyes sometimes and think about something other than swimming, maybe a time when I was really happy, like I did a really fun activity, I'd think about that. Or sometimes I'd pick one aspect of my race. So it used to be my start. When I was working on my starts, I'd just picture watching myself do a perfect start. And I found that calmed my nerves a bit because it'd be like, right, I can do that. I've seen myself do it. And I just pick one aspect because you can't look at the whole race when you're in the cool room and that would stress you out. But now I think about my turn. So I just visualize myself doing a turn and then going into the race. I think if I nail my turn, no matter what, I'll be happy because it's what I'm working on. It's a process goal of mine. So it doesn't matter what the time would be because you can't get caught up on the time. I think I had to remind myself that quite a lot. I think it was like, if I nail the turn, the time's going to be good. And even if it isn't, I've still done something good to make myself a better swimmer.
So for anyone who isn't aware of Lauren Cox and her journey so far in swimming, she is a swimmer who trains out of Loughborough University under the coach Ian Hulme. She's part of the main international squad of sprinters that they have in that setup, training with the likes of Louise Hansen, who we have previously had on this podcast. Now, she made the switch over to Loughborough a few years ago after training at Coventry for 6 years. This summer, she came away from the World Championships with a bronze in the 50 meters backstroke, racing against World Championship superstars Kaylee McKeown and Regan Smith, and almost beating them to gold. So on this week's show, we're going to be talking to Lauren about those World Championships, what is to come in the future, the training setup at Loughborough, and of course, why target 50s when 100 meters are the Olympic event? Dan, it's going to be a great podcast, so let's get into it. Okay, so please welcome onto the podcast this week, World Championship bronze medalist in the 50 meter backstroke, Lauren Cox. Lauren, thank you for joining us this week. How are things with you? Has it sank in that you're actually a world's medalist?
No, it hasn't fully sank in. I keep on thinking like, gosh, I actually did that last week. It's still a bit crazy. So yeah.
Are you aware that you were the first female British swimmer to claim an individual world medal since 2015?
I did see a tweet about that, and I actually didn't believe it when I saw it. But that makes the medal even better. And I think I was more shocked about that than the actual medal itself. I thought that was even better. Yeah,
because British women, it's said these days that the men are like the star or like the stars of the show, but actually you think back and women's swimming in this country isn't weak. Like it is really strong, and the girls that you were part of the team of are really good swimmers, which is why it's such a shock that it has been that long.
Yeah, the girls on the team are amazing. So like that's why it shocked me, I think, is because I just think like, the swimming in Great Britain for females is at such a high standard, I think. And I think it's crazy to then compare that to like the world standard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were one of the very few, or lucky few, who had your parents out there with you in the crowd. So what was it like for them to kind of experience you winning that medal in front of them?
Oh, they were so happy. My parents have been the drivers of my career, really. They were the ones that would get up in the morning to drive me at silly o'clock to Coventry and swim. And they fund me the whole way through. Like they still are funding me now. So it was so special for them to see like all their hard work, time and money has like really paid off. And they're such big sports fans themselves. They both played sport when they were younger. So they're really passionate. They love seeing everyone in the team. They keep up to date with what they're doing and like where their swims, how they're swimming. So, they were really, really happy to be there and they loved every minute of it.
What was their immediate reaction to your medal? Was it more tears, joy? What was the kind of emotions? Just everything, I imagine.
Yeah, everything. I think they were really happy. My dad gets more nervous than I do, so I think he was a bit shocked. And they said that where they were sitting, they couldn't quite see, so they were waiting on the board for the times to come up, and they couldn't tell if I'd just got it or missed it. And then when it came up, they were so happy, and they were taking loads of pictures, and I'm sure there were a couple of tears, but they didn't show me them when I went and said when I showed them my medal.
I'm sure there's photo frames already up on the walls at the home.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's been a couple Instagram posts as well, which I love seeing them trying to take selfies. Really funny.
I mean, you say they couldn't see it there. When we were at home, we couldn't see it either. It very nearly looked like you got gold. Like it was within touching distance. Has as much as winning a bronze medal has sank in, has it sank in that you were that close to a gold?
No, it hasn't. I think that was crazy. And part of me is thinking like, oh, if only my finish was a little bit better. And some people, quite a few people said to me like, oh, Lauren, you almost got that. And I was like, I did not think I could win a medal. I was going in there wanting to make a final and just like get a PB, you know, and then to think I was that close to actually winning kind of blows my mind a bit, because I never put myself up there with the girls I'm swimming against. So yeah.
So you've watched your race back now then?
Yes.
Ooh,
and
okay, so
it was close. And I was thinking like, I don't remember swimming the race. My mind kind of goes blank from taking my like clothes off to then being behind the block. I don't actually remember what I did in the race. So it was funny watching me swim it, because I was like, wow, I really did that.
I mean, you're racing the two best backstrokers that have ever lived, and arguably nearly beating them over the course of the 50-meter swim. That's quite incredible, really.
Yeah, I've watched them. I watched their trials, you know, the Australian and then the USA ones, and I was like, wow, they're just incredible swimmers. And then when I was like next to them in the cool room, and then you just kind of realize like they're just normal people. They're just like, you know, ask you to put their straps up, and that kind of like made it feel a bit more normal to me, because I was like, they're no different to me. They're just really, really fast in the water.
Yeah, I think that's actually something we find out all the time when we're on this podcast speaking to swimmers. It's just like, okay, they get nervous for doing a podcast just like we do. They're like everyday human beings. Like they are like the superstars of our sport, but at the same time, it's just a person at the end of the day. Like, and you can relate to them when you're in that environment.
Yeah, I get that with being on like the GB team. It was like, these people I've looked up to my whole swimming career, and now I'm sitting at a table having dinner with them. I had to like pinch myself a couple of times, like, wow. And they're just normal. I was like, wow, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. Now, something we kind of always regrettably say on this podcast is that British swimming doesn't really target the 50s. Like, even though you've won your medal in it, it's not a massive part of what British swimming wants to achieve. But was it a big part of your program? Did you put an emphasis on it at this World Championships?
Definitely. I think it was, I know that the 50s aren't favoured because they're not Olympic events, and I always get that. And I don't like it when people call me a 50 swimmer, because I can't be a 50 swimmer unless I do 53, because my ultimate goal is to make the Olympics, and I'm not going to do that in the 50. But so in my program, it's 100. Like, that's what I train for, the 100. And I'm good at the 50, so it's like we do that just because I'm good at it, really. Like, we're not going to not do it, because it doesn't really, it's short enough that it doesn't really like affect my 100. If it was to come before in Worlds, I could still do it, but luckily it falls after. So, and I think it supplements the 100 quite well, because, you know, you've got to get out quick. I mean, they're both sprints, so you just got to come back on one of them, and the other one you can stop, which I'm much better at doing. But yeah, I think the 50 is not really a focus of mine. It's one of my strengths, but I'm definitely more 100 focused at the minute.
Do you think the attitude towards 50 events in this country needs to change? So, like, for example, you won a medal, obviously, but then you take a look at the 50 breaststroker Imogen Clark, who arguably could have won a medal herself over, well, this year and previous years as well. Is that a thing that probably British swimming should look at and change, potentially?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, 50s are great and they're in every other major meet than the Olympics. So I don't see why we can't, for a World Championships, qualify on a 50, or they just take us to do a 50 because, I mean, at the end of the day, it'd be another medal for them. Like, I'm sure Imi would have medaled, and that makes British swimming look better. But I do also see why they don't, because why would they want to fund people or like spend money on people when it's not going to be in the Olympics, which is everyone's.
The Olympics is a goal.
Yeah, the Olympics is the main thing for anyone. It's the main thing for British swimming, and an event that's not going to be there, like, it sucks. And what needs to change is they need to be added into the Olympics, because that would be way better. But at the minute, it's not looking like that's going to happen. So we kind of just have to accept it, and it's something that's out of our control. But it's definitely not fair, because I love the 50, and if I could just do the 50, I would, but I can't. So yeah,
it's a real shame you say it doesn't look likely that it's going to be added to the Olympic program. We're going to ask you what maybe you thought it's going to take to get there, but you come away from a World Championships like this and the excitement around the 50s. There were world records hit all over the place in women's 50 breaststroke. It's
53, yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame that these events that are so exciting, and they're not going to get in the way of the program because they're 20 seconds, 30 seconds long. And in a world of the TikTok era, like that might be the way to draw a new audience in. It is that really fast sprint. So like maybe LA it might come around then, but even then I think it might be a long shot, which it is a big shame.
Yeah, I wish that there were more conversations. I mean, maybe there are conversations, but I'm not knowing about them, about the 50s being introduced, because I think more people would watch them. Like, I know people who aren't even like swimming fans would much rather watch a 20-second race over a potential like 4 or 5 minute race, you know? So I'm not, I don't know, but hopefully I keep my fingers crossed that they're going to be added, because that would be pretty amazing.
Well, we just think it would draw more casual viewers, you know, the people that aren't in the swimming circle. They'd more likely watch a 50-metre race than, like you said, like the 400 or plus distances like that. But yeah, it's very difficult because I don't know how it would fit in the program. They've already added another day anyway to fit in the 800 and the 1500. So adding another day to make it, what then, a 10-day Olympic meet, that's then quite long. You know, you're looking at the best part of 2 weeks. So I don't know how it'd fit in. But I think it'd be amazing from a spectator point of view. I think this should be looked at, but I don't know how it's going to work.
It would. I'm sure if they properly looked, they'd be able to fit them in. But it's whether
they do at Worlds, don't they?
Yeah, they do it everywhere else. At commies, they did it. Like exactly. I don't understand why it's different at the Olympics, but hopefully they think that they can do it soon.
Okay, so you say you're more suited then to race in the 50. That's the one you love. So how does that help your 100? Because the 100 is the goal. The 100 is the Olympic event. How does the 50 translate to the 100?
So it's definitely like having that speed, that top end speed. Like my rate is quite high. So I think that helps in the first length. And then it's just trying to maintain that. Like something I've been working on is not going out too crazy in the first 50, because then I've got nothing to come back on. I've got to like try and rein in my speed a bit to be able to maintain it. But I think it's better, I don't know, but in my head, it's better for me to be able to rein in my speed than to try and produce it to go out quick enough if I'm more of a back end swimmer. I definitely think that for the 100, because it is still like a very quick sprint. And the girls, I mean, Regan and Kaylee went out in 27s, I want to say 28 low, you know, like that's so quick. And it's like, that is so close to their 50 PB. And then they're coming back. Like the speed is a huge part of the 100.
So as you're a sprinter, is it then easier to have the easy speed at the start and then come back a bit stronger at the end? So like, for example, the Chinese breaststroker, who I thought was just a 1500 meter breaststroker, but then going out in his 200, he went out in a 60 points, so it's PB plus 3. That I assume that would be quite comfortable for him, so that he's got enough energy on the way back for the second half. Would that kind of relate to you as well? So you can go, let's say, I don't know, PB plus 1 on the first 50, and then you've got enough for the second 50?
Yeah, I think theoretically, yes. I think I'm still trying to work on that balance, because I think I went out in 29 low or 28 high, and then came back in like a 30 point. I need to be going out quicker, but then sometimes if I go out quicker, I die a lot harder. So it's that easy speed can sometimes not be easy enough. But I think that's more me trying to find a good race plan. But it's good that I've got the option to either go super, super, super like ratey, like super high, or maybe try and bring it back in. I think it's easier to train your mind essentially that way to race that event.
When you talk about it's you trying to find a perfect race plan, how do you go about that? Because we've spoken, I think, to Luke Turley before, and he said the way they go about it at Bath is there's loads of lactate testing going on, and essentially it's you have to go out at a certain, like within 0.1 of a second. Otherwise, if you go too fast, you produce too much lactate to then hurt your back end. Is it the same sort of thing for you in the 100 and the Loughborough setup that you're a part of?
Definitely. I think it's been a lot more trial and error this year. Like I remember saying to Ian sometimes, I'm just going to absolutely bomb it down this first length and we'll see what we've got on the way back. And it doesn't really work very well. Painful. And then other times it's been like, instead of doing like lactate focus, we do a lot of lactate testing. But I find for me to be able to like relate it and understand it, I need to be on like rates work. So I know if I go out in my 50 is like, I go out in like 60 plus. So sometimes I hit 63 and then I drop down to like 57, 58, hopefully by the end of the race. In my 100, if I go out in a 60, I'm not making it past in that last 15. Whereas if I go out in like a 57, I can hold it a bit more. So that's similar to like the lactate stuff, but much more like rate based.
Okay, so there might be a few people listening to this podcast who don't know what a rate is. Could you just explain it in kind of simple terms what that means then going out in a 57 or a 60?
So I think it's just the rate of like my arms. So my turnover rate, how fast I'm spinning my arms. Coaches do it differently. And like there's many different ways people can do their rate. Like I think you can do it a minute, like in a minute, and then I think you can do it in the 50 per minute, and then like throughout the 50. So
okay, so it's like revolutions more than a stroke count essentially. That is how it's done.
Because I know some of the breaststrokers I train with do it on stroke count, whereas mine is always rate based. So I actually don't know how many strokes I do in a length. It's definitely not 60, but that's like just how I do it. Nuts. Yeah.
So you'd say you're still learning the 100 then?
Definitely. I think for me being so fast twitchy naturally and like sprinty, I do find the 100 quite difficult to like wrap my head around. And I think I've definitely not had the perfect race yet in the 100. And I'm still trying to find out how I can drop down. Like people think I should be going a lot quicker than I do because of my 50. And in my head, I believe that, but I've still got to find out how to swim it properly. Because I think every race I do good bits. I've just got to string it together and see what happens.
See, I actually think the 100 backstroke is one of the harder races. It kind of goes under the radar because it hurts your legs so much. Like you say, if you bomb it from the first 50, the legs on the last 25, my God, you can't feel them. You're sinking. It's tragic. But you're doing quite well, to be fair. You've gone sub 60. What did you go? 59.7 in the semi-finals to just miss out on a final.
Yeah.
That was I was quite gutted when I saw that because I thought there was another gear to be found there.
Yeah.
How pleased are you with your season's results in that 100 meters?
I'm so pleased. From starting, I wanted to break a minute last year. That was my goal last year. And then when I didn't do it, I was like, oh, that's kind of annoying. So it was a major goal this year. And I just missed out at trials going 0.01. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me. I remember I was happy, but I was like, I didn't want to go that. And why did I go 0.02 over? Like, I was so confused because I was so ready to go 59. And then I did it out of the blue at Seti Collie. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And I think that was a huge barrier for me. It was so annoying when I came 10th. I was so upset. I was like, what is going on? Because I was like, it was like, I couldn't, that was like matched my best time. I thought I could go a bit quicker, but I was still happy that I went 59 again because I did it once. And then I was like, ooh, can I do that again? but I did, and then I did it again in the relay. So I think I'm a bit consistent now going under 60. But it was a huge barrier. I think like breaking a minute for a 100 backstroker is massive, and people hype that up. To me, at least, it was like Ian was always going, "You can go 59. You need to go 59. I believe you can go 59." And then eventually I did it. It was amazing. And now it's like, how far down in the 59s can I get?
Yeah, it's almost like the marker from a very good elite backstroker to then, once you go under 60, you're world's level, aren't you? That's essentially the standard you're at.
Yeah. And I think I'd kept missing that up till this point, and I felt like I wasn't really a world-class swimmer in my 100, but I was in my 50, and now they're getting closer together, which is what I want.
And it's more of like a mental hurdle you've overcome this season.
Oh yeah, for sure. I really struggle mentally with the 100. I think I put a lot of my pressure on myself to it because it's my only event I can qualify into the Olympics for. I really get emotional over the 100 because it's like I have one shot and it needs to be good, and I feel like my 100 isn't good enough yet compared to like the other girls in Britain. Like it needs to be better if I want to be able to compete with them. And I put a lot of pressure on myself, which makes me not enjoy the 100 even more, even when it's painful, and then I get myself worked up over it. So I'm definitely trying to find a balance of still enjoying it, and because then when I enjoy it, I do really well. Whereas if I get a bit in my head about it, I tend to just not swim it great.
Do you work on the psychological aspects of it?
Yeah, I do a lot of psych stuff to help. I get very, very nervous before competing, and that used to really hinder my performances when I was younger. So I've definitely worked with sports psychs throughout my career to really try and make sure my head's in the right place. Because I like everyone struggles with like their mental health and especially in swimming, like it's such a hard sport and it's every day, early mornings, which are not my forte, and you know it gets tough, and we all need help sometimes, and sometimes I just need to have a chat and get it all out. And then with the nerves, I couldn't have gone to Worlds without having that sports psych support. I wouldn't have done as well there. I would have crumbled under the pressure for sure.
So when you were younger, if we've got a younger when you were younger, if we've got a younger listener who's listening to you right now, who has the same sort of issue, like getting nervous before the races, what did you do when you were, let's say, 13, 14 sort of years old?
So I did a lot of visualization of anything really. If I'm in the cool room, I just close my eyes sometimes and think about something other than swimming. Maybe a time when I was really happy, like I did a really fun activity, I'd think about that. Or sometimes I'd pick one aspect of my race. So it used to be my start. When I was working on my starts, I'd just picture watching myself do a perfect start. And I found that calmed my nerves a bit because it'd be like, right, I can do that. I've seen myself do it. And I just pick one aspect because you can't look at the whole race when you're in the cool room, and that would stress you out. But now I think about my turn. So I just visualize myself doing a turn, and then going into the race, I think if I nail my turn, no matter what, I'll be happy because it's what I'm working on. It's a process goal of mine. So it doesn't matter what the time would be because you can't get caught up on the time. I think I had to remind myself that quite a lot. I think it was like, if I nail the turn, the time's going to be good. And even if it isn't, I've still done something good to make myself a better swimmer. So
and that second 50 is going to hurt a little bit less as well.
Yeah.
You block that. Don't even think about that. Like, I don't want to imagine the pain.
I can't think about the pain just before, because then I'll bottle it and point to it.
Yeah.
Now, you've already mentioned them on this podcast. So two amazing backstrokers that you got to race, and they're world class across every single distance. Is Kaylee McKeown and Regan Smith.
Yep.
So, what was it like to race them in the pool? So you've spoken about making them human outside of the pool, but have you looked at their swims and taken away anything that you can add to your own, because they're going or trading world records left, right and center?
Yeah, they're incredible swimmers, and I was so honoured to be in the same pool as them the other week. And I definitely looked at their turn, because the turn is a huge thing of what I'm working on. So I've been watching what they do, their approach, their underwaters is a big thing. Like my underwaters are quite weak, so I was looking at off the start. Their starts are both really good, and I think my start in the semi was better than my start in the final. and it was similar to, because I was in with Regan, it was similar to Regan's that day. So I think they're the two technical aspects I've been watching them for. And also I like to see, when I was there, I like to see what they do in the cool room, how they act. Because, for example, like watching the boys in the cool room, when you see them on the telly, they're all very serious, you know, they don't smile, they don't do anything. So I thought, oh, I wonder what they're doing, because I didn't really know how to act in a cool room. I didn't. I kind of acted how I'd want to, but I kind of looked what they were doing, learnt from them. And they're just, you know, sitting having a chat. Their teammates were both with them each time, I think. So they were just talking to them, talking to the girls around them. And I think it was quite like a relaxed, it made me feel more relaxed that they act just chill in the cool room instead of being quite scary. So I think it was nice to see them in that sense and learn bits about that.
Have you? So you said you've looked back at your own races. Do you look back at Regan and Kaylee's swim and then take that back to Loughborough with yourself and Ian, watching it back and then taking bits and pieces and implementing it into your swimming? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I think we will do. We'll have a meeting at the beginning of the season and we'll talk about last season, the good, the bad, what can be better, what don't we want to do this season. And I think I'm definitely going to, like, we will look, and I'm sure he will look at what they're doing and try and see if I can do that or something different or change what I'm doing, for example, in my turn. And I think it's good to, like, take bits from them. Like, I remember when I first joined Loughborough, Georgia Davies was training with us, and obviously an amazing backstroker. And she gave, me and Louise were doing backstroke starts with her, and I learned so much from that. And she probably doesn't even realize that I was like so engaged, but that definitely helped my start loads. So I definitely think looking at what they're doing will help me even more, because I look up to them. So I'm obviously going to try and want to be like them, or at least take bits of it to make mine better.
So while we're here then, let's talk a little bit more about your training then at Loughborough. So you're not actually part of the two national centre setups that go on at the Pool of Dreams, if that's what I remember it's called. Yeah. You're actually swimming under Ian Hulme. So reveal to us a little bit more what that squad is like and how training works for you.
So in our squad, it's a bit different to the national centre. We have a bunch of internationals with us. So we've got 2 Swedish girls, we've got Irish, we've got Polish, you know. So I quite like that because there's no direct competition. Like, I'm not fighting these people for a spot on the Olympic team, for example, like you would be in the national centre. That's quite like a harsh way of putting it, but I'm not their direct opponents until we get to the world stage, which I quite like because I'm not constantly comparing myself to them during training. So that's obviously really good, which I really enjoy. The whole setup is quite cool. We're all at uni. Most of us are at uni, a couple aren't, which is really nice. So our times roughly work around uni. Sometimes there's a couple clashes, but we all get individualized programs, which is really good. We have S&C, which is amazing. The support at Loughborough is incredible. I get quite a lot, and I'm really grateful for that. And then our setup at Loughborough is pretty good, and it's very one-on-one with Ian. Like, we do a lot of meetings, we do a lot of catch-ups. He is very on top of us being okay with our, like, we get a weekly plan every week. He's like, any issues, let me know. It's very tailored. So if I have classes, it can be moved. I can come in another session. If I have something on at the weekend, not all the time, but sometimes he's very lenient at letting me either have Saturday morning off, or I'll just move Saturday and fit it in on like a Wednesday morning, which I think is really good. Like, our coach athlete relationship is like one of the main things, and definitely we've worked on that since year one. I know that's been a really big thing for both me and Ian, especially, is just making sure we're both comfortable with each other, we both trust each other, so that we can get the best out. And it's clearly working because I'm swimming really, really well, and I feel 100%. I trust him completely that his training works for me. And I think that that's the main thing of what's helped me get to where I am. That and the Loughborough facilities are pretty cool, because obviously the national centre's there as well. Great facility.
Well, yeah, that was my next question. Have you been asked to go over to the national performance squads, or have you wanted to, or like considered it in any sort of way?
I've never been asked personally, but I have thought about it. But I don't really like moving a lot. Like, I was at Coventry for 6-7 years, same coach there. Came to Ian, that was like first big change really. And then it takes me a while to get used to someone. So I think I don't want to change as much as some people do. Some people are quite good at changing. So I've never really fully considered it. I guess if anything was to happen, then potentially I would, because I quite like being in Loughborough because it's close to my home. But other than that, no, I'm quite happy with where I am. I think it's a much more relaxed environment than the National Centre. That's how I perceive it anyway. It might not be, but I do quite like being in the uni squad. It's quite fun.
I mean, everything you say about like, or we've said so many times on this podcast, like a happy swimmer makes a fast swimmer, and going way off on a tangent here, is exactly the relationship that Ollie Morgan has with his coach Gary, which is why Ollie Morgan has dropped leaps and bounds this year. Yeah. So why would you want to move? Like, you and Ian, sounds like you've like taken a few years to build up this trust, this relationship. Like, hopefully it just reaps the rewards again next year with Paris on the horizon.
Yeah, hopefully. I think going into Paris, I don't want to change too much. I definitely wouldn't want to change anything too drastic, because I mean, it's going to be quite a high stress year. So being with someone that I'm already comfortable with and I trust, and we've had results for the 2 years I've been there. So I mean, there's no reason on paper why that can't happen next year. Obviously there's other things involved that could happen, but theoretically it looks like it could be good for next year for us working together.
So how does the training shift away from the 50 now going into Olympic year? Do you know like next year's block? I know you've just said you haven't had a meeting with Ian just yet, but do you have a rough idea of how next year's going to pan out? Yeah,
so I think it's going to be pretty similar to last year. Pretty heavy winter block going into it. I get back late September. So I think it's going to be like all systems go from the minute I get in. Heavy training. I know we're going to do a couple camps again, which will be really good. I love a swim camp, so I think that would be really good. But can't say I'm looking forward to the winter training block. That's always the worst one.
Who does anyone?
I hope not, because if they did, that'd be weird. But no, I think it will be good. I am really excited to get back in. I'm ready to just get in and give my all. My training is very back-end speed based, so I do a lot of back-end speed, and it's got to be at the right time, because obviously that's my weakest area of my 100 is my back-end speed. So I think it's going to be a lot more of that. It's come on a lot this year, my back-end speed. So I think also we're just going to have conversations about how I need to swim the race and see, which I've already spoken about, and see like what changes we could make there to
So what's the ultimate goal next year beyond making the Olympic team in Paris? That's the obvious answer, but what is the goal, or what is going to be written down on your locker for 2024?
Definitely make the Olympic team, but not only make it, make a final. I'd love to be in that 100 back final in Paris. I think that would be incredible. And I also, like, obviously we have the relays. I'd love to be the final swimmer for the relays. Like I get at the minute I'm probably just the heat swimmer so far, and I'd love to be able to be the one that they know they can count on for the final. That's definitely a massive goal of mine. So just that is probably number one, because to be a part of that mixed and then the female medley relay would be incredible. Like we have the world record in one. That's amazing. So to be a part of that team would just be incredible. And I think I don't want to just be in the heats. I want to be the final swimmer. So I'll be a bit disappointed. Obviously, very grateful, but in myself, I expect more than just to be like the heat swimmer.
Interesting. So relays are just as important as the individual swim. Is that right?
Definitely. I think that's a massive, the British swimming are really trying to bring that into the sport now, is like they really like the relays just as much as the individual. And I think in some cases the relays are a much better chance at potentially getting a medal for some people. So I think that's great that they should focus on them, because then you become Olympic champion or Olympic medalist. That's life-changing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, the attitude has worked so far. Like, there's obviously been hard decisions to make around individuals and at the Worlds and Olympics before, but I mean, it's a sport that's judged on outcome, and the outcome for the relays has been world class.
Yeah.
So, I understand it, and I I don't know. It's really interesting to see that you're not just stopping at making the Paris team. It's nope, not even just a heat swim. Nope, final of a relay and beyond, which is really
Got to
good
aim
see.
big, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
100%.
No, yeah, I think that's the main thing is I need something to get me out of bed in the morning, and being one of those 8 in the Olympic final, whether it's a relay or an individual or both, if I'm lucky enough, that's like a main thing, because it's one thing to go to the Olympics and then another to like make the final. That's what I dream of. So whether it's Paris or LA, if I'm still around, that's still going to be in the back of my mind every day.
Absolutely. Well, Lauren, before we finish this podcast, we do usually do some quick fire questions,
Okay.
so that our audience can get to know you that little bit better. Most of them are easy. We finish with a very left field one.
Yeah.
Okay.
We finish with left field one. So what is your favourite event in swimming?
50 backstroke.
Who is your swimming idol?
Oh, Kaylee McKeown.
Oh, I like it. What's your proudest swimming moment so far?
Swimming at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham.
What is the hardest set you've ever done?
Oh, probably we did these 1050s off 2 minutes, one easy, one back end speed off 2 minutes, and that was really, really, really hard after doing relays to begin with, 50 relays, which was that was really hard. Yeah, I don't think I've explained the hardness enough there, but I really struggled in that session.
It kind of sounds like is it like lactic building 50s, but you've got an active recovery in the middle of it.
Yeah, and lactate, when it hits me, it hits, and I am crying in my goggles in this session.
And final question, it helps people to get to know you a little bit away from the swimming pool. So if you were to go on a road trip, there's 3 spaces in the car. You can take friends, family, celebrities, anyone you want. Who would you take with you?
My mum, because she can talk so much, so there would never be an awkward silence. Channing Tatum, because I love him and I think that'd be really cool. And probably Nicki Minaj, because I love her music. And what better than karaoke carpool with a singer?
Nice.
New
Awesome.
names. Haven't had those before. New names.
I'd be surprised if we've had Lauren's mum before.
Yeah. Well, she talks to everyone, so, she might have got in there.
Maybe. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. It's been a lot of fun, and massive congratulations for your World Championship bronze medalist. I hope it sinks in the near future, and best of luck heading forward into Paris in 2024.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Honestly, I'm just going to echo what Scott said, and just best of luck for Paris and the year leading up to it. Obviously, we've got to get there first. So British Trials is going to be a big old meet, I think. So best of luck for it.
Thank you.
So Dan, brilliant to speak to one of GB's medal-winning members from the World Champs. Fascinating story of Lauren's in itself. The fact that she is mainly a 50 swimmer, and she outwardly says, like, if the 50 was at the Olympics, she'd love it. And that is her favourite event. It is her strongest event, but she actually can't race the 50 at Olympics. So she has to work out what's best for swimming the 100, which is the Olympic event. And it's actually really interesting to hear.
Yeah, the fact that she's still learning the event. It's weird to say that she's a world championship medalist, and yet she's still learning the event. I know it's an extra 50 meters, but still learning the event. It's very interesting. It's quite interesting that, I don't think novice is the right word, but the kind of novice mentality of, in the call room and looking over at the other girls and taking bits and pieces away from what they do there, and then having a look at the video replay of how Kaylee and Regan are swimming and taking bits and pieces and then implementing it into the training afterwards. It's quite interesting, and the way that she dealt with nerves, I thought that was quite a good message as well, which is why I asked that question. If there's a younger swimmer listening to this and who have that same issue, because I deal with nerves as well, don't I? So it's quite interesting that she it's quite interesting that she had that same thing, and the way she visualizes just one aspect, just think about the start, or just think about the turn, or think of one thing rather than the whole race, because then it becomes overwhelming. I thought that was a really good message from Lauren, and one that a few swimmers might take away something from that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think she did the right thing at Worlds to look at these girls in Regan and Kaylee and be like, oh, what are they doing? Because Paris is the ultimate goal. It's the reason that 50 isn't the target for British women. It's the reason the 100 is, because the Olympics is what our sport is, whether you like that or not. I know me and you have our own private opinions about that. But I think there's a huge future for her, especially when we say, and you just said, she's still learning the event. Like she's, and by event you mean the 100 back. 100. Like she's still getting to grips with how to race it best when she is essentially the fastest backstroker in this country, like speed wise. I would say if she's just won a medal at 50. And she's now broken that mental barrier of the 60-second mark, which is a big deal in women's backstroke. That is a big one to get through. And we saw what happened to Medi. As soon as she passed that mark, essentially 12 months ago, the snowball's been rolling ever since, and she's taken it all within her stride. And I kind of feel like the same's coming for Lauren. Like the mental aspect is the hurdle, and she's getting over that.
Yeah, and the setup as well in Loughborough. Obviously, the partnership she has with Ian, the fact that it's a uni squad. I remember you saying, you said about Ollie Morgan and how his trajectory has gone so well. It could be the same for Lauren as well.
I did really like the fact that she openly said she enjoys not racing against her national competitors. Like, that's a really interesting thing, because most people would want to test themselves against the best in this country day in, day out. But actually, you think she's testing herself against the best in the world. And, well, Louise Hansen isn't a world championship backstroker, but she's a good backstroker and she's a world championship swimmer. It's interesting that is what helps her build some mental toughness and important to her journey, and I quite like that.
Yeah, well, again, I think it's just about enjoying it and being happy in the environment that you're in. And she came from Coventry, which she said is not too far away from where she's training now, so she's able to go home if necessary. I just generally think the setup that she has is comfortable. I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but it's a happy sort of place, you know, and so that's the reason why she's getting results, I think. And so, again, another message for everyone: as long as you're enjoying yourself, you will get the best out of yourself.
100%. So that just about rounds up this week's episode of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. We will be back next week, where we are talking the LEN Under-23's inaugural event, hopefully, touch wood, if everything goes to plan. But don't worry, there are going to be more World Championship swimmers appearing on this podcast over the next few weeks. We just thought it's a new competition. Let's touch upon it next week and see how it goes. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And me and Dan will see you in 7 days' time.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to the Propulsion Swimming Podcast with Scott and Dan. We want to thank you for joining us and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as checking out the Propulsion Swimming YouTube channel for weekly tutorials and videos to get your swimming fix. We will be back next week. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.